Welcome back to the Sunny Talk Spurs YouTube channel. And you probably guessed from the title what the video is about today. You know, the transfer window is shut. We're now in the international break. Thomas Frank has had 2 wins and 1 loss already as Spurs boss. We've got a nice rich squad, hopefully, after this transfer window. Maybe a left winger could have been brought in. But today, myself and the brilliant Alice Talks Football are going to pick Tottenham's ideal starting lineup. And I know what a lot of you are going to say. Well, Frank loves to change. He likes to tinker. Well, we're going to do a traditional 4-2-3-1 and 4-3-3 probably as well, and then finish with a 3 at the back formation because we know Frank likes to play those sort of formations. But before we go any further, let's introduce Alice. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, thanks, Sonny. How are you doing?
Yeah, not bad. We were just saying off camera, weren't we? We feel a bit calmer now. The transfer window
Oh,
is, I think me,
that
you, and everyone were running around like
last
headless
week.
chickens.
I think that is probably one of the busiest transfer final weeks I can remember in my lifetime.
Yeah, I am still a bit surprised we Spurs were involved in some deadline day deals. Manchester United didn't do too much in the end, but I feel like you got a lot of your. I say a lot because I know you wanted a midfielder, but you got a lot of your
Got
targets in, didn't you, early on?
pretty good attackers and we got a goalie in the end. I think the Nana and Bahendia
Mm.
performances this season, they weren't going to get a goal in, and I think they were. I think they thought, oh my God, we need a goalie, even if it's not an experienced one. Like we need a keeper.
Yeah, I think we're quite blessed with keepers. So at the moment, I'm quite content, and that's probably where we will start. But before we go any further, if you are new to the Sign Talk Spurs YouTube channel, then get down below, leave your likes, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and let me know in the comments what would your ideal Tottenham starting 11 be for most games. But if you think you want to do a more defensive option, put them all in the comments down below, and in the description, I have Alice's channel. But you all know who she is. She's basically a Tottenham fan at this stage. According, my dad says that, to be fair, so I've got to get that one in early. But as you can see on screen right now, we have the formation. We'll go with the 4-2-3-1, but it could sort of mimic as a 4-3-3 as well. And we'll start where you have to start with most teams, with the goalkeeper. And Alice, Tottenham's goalkeepers, I mean, maybe up for a little bit of debate. There has been some questions that the number one spot is up for grabs this season, but we have Guglielmo Vicario, who started the season quite well, kept us in the game against Bournemouth, actually. Antonin Kinsky has been at the club, since January. And our only home trained player, which is an issue for UCL, Brandon Austin. So, who are you picking as Spurs' keeper for this season?
I think it's got to be Vicario. As you said, he started the season strongly. He's not put a foot wrong this season. I think there's definitely areas of Vicario's game, like set pieces, he can improve upon. But I think he's been better recently, and he's a solid keeper, to be honest.
Yeah, I think, even from set pieces and something that I think Thomas Frank is going to focus on. He already has. I was at the game against Bournemouth in the pre-match warm-ups. They're doing set pieces. They're practicing him claiming. He has looked a bit better. It's not as suspect because apparently Ange didn't care about him. But I think, Antonin Kinsky, there is, that position could be up for grabs in certain games. In cup games, he'll be claiming the gloves. Brandon Austin's an all right backup, but he is pretty much there for that homegrown, club trained quota. But yeah, Kinsky's range of passing helps him, and also, backing up Vicario even a bit more, we're seeing him go long. And I feel like Vicario's distribution when he goes long is better when he is sort of playing out from the back. So, yeah, I'm pretty confident that Vicario is that starting keeper. And also on Kinsky, I mean, I don't know how much you have seen of him, Alice. What have you made of him when he has put on the Tottenham gloves?
I mean, yeah, he's not played loads and loads. I think his debut, I remember that being really impressive. I think he's been all right. I think he's just a solid backup. Like, I don't think I've seen him do enough to say Vicario's in trouble. But I think if Vicario had a bad run of form, then there's enough that Kinsky's done to be given a chance.
Yeah, and I think I'm looking at, I've got the transfer mark squad up in front of me, and the ages of the keepers are quite good as well. You got 28 years old for Vicario, Kinsky's 22, and Brandon Austin's 26. So there's no like oldies holding us back, and you got some nice youth in there for the future. So yeah, I hope Kinsky does get some chances, but yeah, Vicario, he wears the number one on his back, and that's where he goes into the team. Next up is probably another position which sort of picks itself, but I want to get your opinion on some of the centre backs at Spurs. So you obviously have Cristian Romero, club captain, Micky van der Ven, who are both injury prone. I will mention that. Then we have obviously this 11 as well. At the time of recording, we're doing it based off fully fit. So I will mention the players in the squad, but fully fit. Let's take that into consideration. Then you have Radu Dragusin, who is injured, expected to be back quite soon. Kevin Danso, who personally I think is very underrated, has come in January and been really good. You've got Ben Davies, who can play left centre back. He also plays left back. And then you've got Kota, Takai. We obviously loaned out Luka Vuskovic as well. He's at Hamburg. So again, Alice, is this another one that pretty much picks itself?
Yeah, I mean, Romero and Van de Ven picked themselves. They've been solid this season. They're probably, arguably, two of your best players in the whole team. When fit, they're so important for your form. Like, I think Danzo's been good. I don't think Danzo's put a foot wrong. And Danzo is the one that obviously comes in if one drops out or if you go to a back three. But that back two, there's going to need to be rotation, of course. There's a lot of games coming up. Danzo's going to get a fair few opportunities. But in the big games, in the important ones, that's who you go with.
Yeah, I think you're pretty spot on. And what I've liked from Spurs so far is the fact that we are playing a little bit deeper. I mean, there was some games like Bayern in pre-season, maybe PSG towards the end in the Super Cup final, where we were maybe defending a little bit too deep. And Romero and Van de Ven for the last 2 years have been used to sitting on the halfway line and running back, but that deep sort of defensive box area defending is where. Actually, in the last couple of Premier League games, they've looked really good. Romero's passing is also strong from the back, sometimes better than some of our midfielders, where you can punch those passes into, Richarlison up top or whoever playing striker. And then Van de Ven, everyone says about his blistering pace, but recovery pace in the box is amazing. There were so many good blocks that he had. And, sometimes the ball over the top from Bournemouth was fantastic. I just want to get your opinion on a few of the other ones. You mentioned Kevin Danso there. Radu Dragusin is one that divides a lot of Spurs fans' opinions. He, wasn't perfect for Ange Ball, but in my opinion, I think maybe for Thomas Frank, I could see him being a bit of a better choice because of like he is good as a box defender. He's got a nice like diagonal pass on him. Do you agree, or do you think maybe
Yeah.
he's one that might have to get moved on?
I think he'll suit Thomas Frankville more than Angeball because he's a box defender. That's what he is. He's not someone that's super quick like a Van der Ven and can high line. He is someone that's better defending deeper and deeper blocks. Like I've not been fully convinced when I've seen Dragusin, but then I'm also aware of the environment and everything and the way that and set up just did not help Dragusin. So I think there's a chance for him to do well under Thomas Frank, but I think it depends how he kicks on this season because I think if he doesn't, he'll probably go next summer.
Yeah, and also we have Kota Takai. I'm not sure how much you've seen of him. Obviously, a little bit of potential at 20 years old. Looks like he's comfortable on the ball, good passer. I mean, because there was rumours heading into deadline day that Spurs were looking for another defender, but I didn't think it would happen because, you know, there was rumours of Hincapi, there was rumours of Gay early on, if you can believe that. But we weren't going to pay 60 million for a defender who was a backup and maybe would put Van de Ven or Romero, out of the team. But I think now Tottenham centre back depth, when Dragusin comes back, you've got about, if you count Ben Davies, you've still got about six defenders. And Vuskovic has come out and said that he wanted to leave 4 minutes. He will get guaranteed minutes at Hamburg. And I just want to get your opinion on him. I know he's out on loan, and I'm not talking about loan players, but I know you've spoke highly of Vuskovic.
Yeah, I did a little bit of research on him, and obviously with the goals he was getting last season as a centre back, obviously got a lot of media attention. And his debut in that little pre-season friendly goal assist, goal line clearance, he looks like a monster. He's young, and I think you have to be careful not to overhype young players, but like he looks like a monster of a player, and I think that could be a big pull for Tottenham. And I think he'll do well at Hamburg, and I think alone was the right move. I think differently, just get a bit more experience, and then potentially, if Dragusin leaves next summer, Vuskovic could come in and challenge a bit more.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much perfect for when it comes to Tottenham centre back. One that is up for debate and is splitting a lot of the Spurs faithful is the fullback positions. Now, many people actually wanted a fullback to come in at left back, which I questioned at stages. But I think when you look at these fullbacks on paper, we've got three very strong fullbacks. We've got two players who can play fullback, who I won't really mention. I'll say Ben Davies can play left back, obviously. And Archie Gray has played right back for Leeds when he was in their promotion team, so he can play there. Um, but I won't mention him in this conversation. But obviously, we have Destiny Udogie as a left back. We have Djed Spence who can play both sides, and Pedro Porro. So, who would you pick in? Let's just say a normal. We're playing this 4-2-3-1. Who do you think is best for? Who are your starting two choices?
Um, to be honest, I think if fully fit and in form, Porro and a doggy. But I do like Djed Spence, and I think Djed Spence, particularly in some of the big games, is very good because he can athletically deal with anyone. But I'm a big fan of a doggy, and I think he's had some injury trouble. But I do think at his very best, he goes in. But you can argue Djed Spence deserves to play, but I think I would just go with Porro and Udogie.
Yeah, I think to me, I'll be honest, from the Bournemouth game, Pedro Porro was having quite a torrid time against Semenyo.
Well,
Um,
defensively, yeah, Spence is
yes,
stronger.
and what happened was Frank took Porro off and swapped Spence to the right back position. Who I think Spence was good, and Desi Udogie came on and looked absolutely electric. I think this is a good headache for Frank to have. I mean, Jed Spence has got an England call up this England camp, so that's quite good. My only worry for Porro, I think, in that game was that cause Papa Matasar was on the other side. Usually, Sar would be sort of defending that space where Porro usually bombs on. So there was an issue there. But I do think, Porro's delivery, his set pieces, it's just so good. And I think Jed Spence, he's happy with his role at the club. He signed 2 new contracts since he was brought back into the team. He was such a big part of the squad last year in winning that Europa League. So, yeah, I think we'd go with Destiny Udogie and Pedro Porro, but Jed Spence could come in
In the
stages.
in the big games, like tricky wingers, I get Jed Spence or Porro for maybe defensive stability, but I think Porro's creative outlet is quite underrated, and I think that would be
Yeah.
good going forward.
Yeah, I think as I said a moment ago, it's a good option. It's a good option to have because not many. Speaking. Let's speak from a Manchester United point of view. I think you'd wish you'd have maybe some stronger fullbacks for Ruben Amorim.
Oh, the wing backs is complicated because Delo in a back four is fine, in a back five it's painful.
Yeah, I've, you're getting a bit speechless after that one, aren't you?
Oh, it's like we've just got like Dorgu's young and good signs, but we don't have anyone else to challenge Dorgu other than Delo, who can play left wing back and right wing back. But Delo in a back four is good. Delo isn't good in a back five, and Mazraoui's now a centre back because he's better in a back four than a back five. And then you got Ahmad, which is actually worked really well in Boomer versus Burnley, but maybe if you're going to play a Liverpool, you'd want maybe someone a bit more defensive there. I mean, our options are just, yeah, I think we could have done with another wing back, but I would pick midfield over any other position right now still.
Yeah. Oh, you're just mourning after that. You wanted Baleba, so I mean, we might compete with you for Baleba next year potentially. So don't hold your breath. Depends who finishes higher. But moving on, funny enough, a good segue there to the midfield, and this is where Tottenham have again quite a rich and different sort of versatile players. I feel like each of these players has different attributes which can benefit Frank Ball. Mentioned him in the fullbacks, but obviously Archie Gray, João Palhinha on loan from Bayern Munich, Rodrigo Bentancur, Yves Bissouma, who probably going to be frozen out this season. I have a feeling maybe by the time this video is out, he's going to make a move to the Turkish league. Lucas Bergvall and Papa Matasar, that sort of midfield duo I'm looking at, or the holder and the 6 and the 8. So I just want to get your opinion, first of all, on the likes of Archie Gray and Lucas Bergvall, who are probably seen as the younger ones who maybe, in the games we've seen so far this season, Gray and Bergvall played against Burnley, where we had more of the ball, but when we've had less of the ball, it's been Palhinha and Bentancur. So, what do you make of the youngsters in this Tottenham squad in those
Yeah,
positions?
I think people are forgetting how young they are. Are they what, 19 and maybe 20 or both 19? And I think, because Bergvall played so much last season and he might play a bit less this season, some fans might be like reactionary and see that as a negative thing and like, oh, he's not playing Bergvall as much. And it's like, no, Bergvall's what, 19, 20. It's quite normal for him to be molded in and play here and there. Like, it's not anything to worry about. I think when you have possession, you want Bergvall there. I think Bergvall's probably a little bit above Gray, I think, in my opinion, in terms of I think he's just more used to being in that midfield. And last season he was phenomenal for you guys. I think it is like, as you mentioned, and like as Thomas Frank has done, if you're playing PSG or Manchester City, you kind of want Palhinha and Bentancur for a little bit of defensive stability. But we know with Palhinha, he's not really good at breaking lines or recycling possession, and a lot of your build-up comes from Romero. Whereas I think, someone like Bergvall and Archie Gray are better on the ball, particularly Bergvall. And I think if you're playing a game where you expect to dominate possession, you could look at Bergvall and Archie Gray. I still think Bergvall and Bentancur would work a little, might complement each other better while Archie Gray sort of learns and develops. And then you've obviously got Sarr, who's been doing really well in the 10 role. But I think, Xavi Simons will probably make that role his own. But it really depends on the game. And I think even Ange went through a lot of combinations because it really depends on who you're playing and what their midfield's like and the way they're going to set up. But if I picked a general two, it would be big games, Palhinha and Bentancur, games that you're going to have possession. maybe you look at someone like Bergvall and Sarr. If Bergvall a holder, I think he's probably better as an eight. But maybe you look at that in terms of the energy and the technicality.
Yeah, I think I agree with you spot on there because, excuse me, if we look at, I think what Spurs fans thought when Frank was obviously confirmed as the manager, we thought, Archie Gray, he wanted him at Brentford, so there's positive signs there. Lucas Bergvall was Spurs' player of the season last year. I know we finished 17th, but he was great in our Europa League campaign and, sort of burst onto the scene. But he has been the player you mentioned there, Papa Matasar, who I had an inkling he would be, have a resurgence under Thomas Frank. He was great in his first season, went a bit missing last year, but didn't really get too many opportunities under Ange in the second campaign. But yeah, I I like Sar's press. I think that's good. But as a 10, it's not for me. And, Palhinha's been good. Bentancur's looked back to his sort of best, maybe not against Bournemouth. But yeah, I think what I'd say is I would go with, at the moment, it's tricky because it is between Bentancur, Palhinha, and Sar for me at current. I don't know because I feel like Palhinha and Bentancur are very different as well. I guess if we're taking this on the 4-2-3-1, I'd probably just still go Bentancur because I'd say his range of passing is probably a little bit better. And those sort of intricate movements we've seen where like Bentancur's picking off the goalkeeper or the fullback and, sort of giving and going. And then Saar does offer those legs. Fantastic sort of. I can't believe like he's proper like an old school box to box. And I feel like at the moment, if we're obviously the 10, I think will pick itself, but we'll talk about that shortly. I feel like at the moment they would probably work better with a Xavi Simons. So I think, yeah,
Yeah.
Bentancur and Sarr for the moment. But good to have that competition. A couple of years ago we were moaning that we didn't have a 6. Now we've got like a lot of players who can play that position. So moving on now to the attacking midfielder or the 10. And I'll say the players, but at this stage, it's a bit pointless because we have Xavi Simons, obviously our brand new statement signing, I'd like to believe. Dejan Kulusevski and James Maddison. Obviously, two of them are injured. Xavi Simons has come in from RB Leipzig. And I actually, earlier on in the week, spoke to European football expert Kevin Hatchard, who gave me his insight of watching Xavi Simons because he's watched a lot of Bundesliga football.
Yeah, and you mentioned some Bundesliga players, past and present, have moved in the last few years. And you've got to think this is the 10-year anniversary since we signed Heung-min Son from the Bundesliga. And look what he went to achieve at Tottenham. But we'll talk about Xavi Simons to start with and what you sort of expect from him after seeing him at RB Leipzig.
Yeah, I think he's a really interesting player. I mean, I think this is a better fit for him than Chelsea would have been, because I think ultimately the main man at Chelsea is Cole Palmer. That's the truth of it. And so that isn't going to be as big a problem at Spurs because I think he'll have more room to really stamp his authority on the team. There's great stuff, the way he moves, the way he beats people, his intelligence in terms of assists, goals. Very, very good player to watch, and I think Spurs fans will love him. My only concern over him is sometimes the body language is not great. Sometimes the attitude isn't all that it could be. Now, I don't know him personally. All I do know is that throughout his time in Germany, there has been talk of, is his attitude the best? Can he be disruptive? That kind of thing. Now, that might be unfair. That might be just idle gossip. It might not be, something that deserves to be attached to him. But there is no doubt that that debate's been in there in the German media. And even when he left, there was a big editorial in one of the major publications in Germany, the major football websites, about the fact that this may be a good thing for Leipzig in the long run in terms of the harmony of the team and maybe making it a little more democratic rather than one superstar. So that bit I'm really interested in. I'm sure Thomas Frank will do a great job with him. I'm sure that it's not as black and white as that and it's a more complex picture. So I'm sure there'll be a few rough edges to smooth in that regard. But in terms of his talent, it's undeniable. The technical ability, the balance, all of that. So I think he'll be an exciting and positive signing for Spurs in the long run.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about his attitude, so I'm glad you brought that up because you were on TalkSport about a month ago talking about his attitude and why Chelsea should maybe be concerned. So I'm glad you brought that up. And I guess from a Spurs point of view, after what I've seen is, and I remember Thomas Frank did a interview with Jake Humphries, and he sort of said when he was at Brentford, he had a no D-head policy. I won't say
Yes.
the words. So maybe Thomas Frank sees it as a player that he can develop, still very young. And also, I read something in another article that said that Thomas Frank apparently, when he was pitching to Xavi Simons, he wasn't showing him how he could work. He was sort of showing the flaws in his game and how he could
Yeah.
improve on them. So what do you make of that sort of approach from Thomas Frank?
Yeah, I think you know, you look at Xavi and you look at where he's been at huge football clubs. So he's seen how the top stars do work and he's seen how they do operate. And some of them are more controversial than others. But I think my only concern about him is how is he going to react to some of the physical punishment that's coming his way, because that happens in the Bundesliga and he doesn't like it. He gets kicked. He's constantly moaning to the referee. He's not alone in that. But if you look at the performance on opening night against Bayern, Leipzig lost 6-0 and he disappeared. And if you look at the third goal particularly, there was very little effort from him to close down Serge Gnabry in the build-up. Now, that doesn't happen all the time, but the fact that it happens at all is something that Thomas Frank will have to work on. But as I say, this is still a relatively young guy who's had a lot of experience for a young guy, and the technical quality is undeniable.
Yeah, I mean, his pathway speaks for itself. PSV, Leipzig, PSG, and, you know, coming through La Masia as well. You've got to be a special talent to come through La Masia, I believe. But yeah, I mean, from my point of view as a Spurs fan, and I was at the game on Saturday against Bournemouth, we are crying out for creativity. There's just no link-up play between the defence, the midfield and the attack at the moment. That's because of absences of James Maddison and Dejan Kulusevski. So I just think as long as he can bring sort of those dribbles from deep that I've seen of him in the Champions League, and even, you know, the only time I've seen him firsthand was I was at the Euro semi-final last year where he pickpocketed Declan Rice and lashed one in from about 20 yards. So we all know he's got that potential. So it is, you know, one to see.
But that's what Kev had to say then, Alice. But what do you think then about Xavi Simons going into that 10? Are you confident he can hit the ground running, or do you think Tottenham fans might have to be a bit patient?
I mean, look, the Premier League's very different to the Bundesliga. It's a lot more physical, and look, he's not as maybe physically built as an Eze to maybe sustain the pressure of big defenders. But in terms of a talent, I think Xavi Simons is ridiculous in terms of a talent, how talented he is. One of those wonder kids that's been hyped up from a young age that's really actually become that player. He went to PSV, was fantastic under Ruud van Nistelrooy, had really good seasons at RB Leipzig. Very good player, very talented player, can play all across the front four. I think his best role is as a 10, but I do also think he could do well in the left wing role under Frank, because he might get a little bit more space out wide as well when he's to play those passes and a bit more time. In the Bundesliga, they give you a bit more space and time. But yeah, as a player, I think he will succeed. He gives me, and he's a little bit different maybe physically, but he gives me a bit of Bruno Fernandes energy in the sense of he just wants to create, be progressive, score. He can get the goals and assists, but he's also very technically gifted. So I think, you know, with Xavi Simons, I think he comes in to be the 10 now. I think once Kulusevski's back, maybe you see him go over to the left and Kulusevski take back that 10 row and Kudus on the right, and that's very, very strong. You know, we spoke off camera about Tottenham probably being a left winger short. I think a Semenyo, someone with a bit of explosiveness, really good ball carrier would have been great on your left wing. But Xavi Simons can bring bits of that. But I think for now, he's the 10. He's the creative player. And I think Tottenham's biggest issue, and I said it before the Bournemouth game, I said Tottenham looks so much better when they score first, because then the opposition leave them a bit more space and attack them. And they're quite solid defensively now to deal with that. But I said Tottenham might have trouble when they've got to break down a team and they've got to score. And I didn't watch really the Bournemouth game, but you went 1-0 down early and I saw the stats, you created nothing. And I think someone like Xavi Simons will be good for that.
Yeah, that's I mean, I did a video on it straight the day after because I was at the game, lacking so much creativity, which I hope Xavi Simons will fill. And also, if you look at it, I've got as I said, I've got the squad list in front of me. He's 22, Kulusevski's 25, Maddison's 28. We don't know. Maddison's injury could be quite impactful to his career. They're all quite different, and you know they all can play in a multitude of different positions, as you said there. Xavi Simons can play on the left. He's played on the right in his career as well. Kulusevski right and mid. Even Maddison could play a bit deeper when he comes back eventually, hopefully. But yeah, I'm quite confident that Spurs have hopefully solved that issue. And you said there about a left winger. A lot of people sort of upset about the left wing position, but yeah, it is one of those ones where it will get solved eventually. But you know, there's a lot of question marks over Spurs' wingers, and we'll move on to that right now. And at the moment, we have Wilson Odobert, we have Mohamed Kudus. So this is left and right wing. We'll do both of them at the same time. Wilson Odobert, Mohamed Kudus, Brennan Johnson, and I'll put Matthias Tell in this category. And I'm just seeing that as I'm recording this, Alice, we've just had a bit of a breaking news tweet from Alistair Gold saying that going off the UEFA website, it looks like Thomas Frank has decided the 6 players to miss out on the Champions League squad for the league phase are Kota Takai, Radu Dragusin, Yves Bissouma, James Maddison, Dejan Kulusevski, and Matthias Tell. So Matthias Tell is not in the Champions League squad, but I've said it on various videos. Tottenham have got an issue when it comes to picking. They haven't got many homegrown players. They haven't got any club trained players. So there is that issue. But I guess when we're looking at the wingers, again at the weekend against Bournemouth, there was an issue with Brennan Johnson maybe not being suited to that game. Ideally, you maybe would have started with Wilson Odobert, who could have dribbled at their defence, and then when it was a bit more leggy, then bring on Brennan Johnson. Especially when Burwell came on, maybe Brennan Johnson should have stayed on because we were getting a bit more passing, a bit more space. So going off that and with that Matthias Tell news, who are you picking as your left and right wingers? As I say, Wilson Odobert, Mohamed Kudus, Brennan Johnson, and Matthias Tell.
I think, Kudus picks himself on the right. I think he's cemented that. He's done well. The thing about Brennan Johnson is he's someone, when it comes to the final action, probably the best you have when it comes to getting that goal, getting that assist. But he doesn't bring anything in like building up to that action. And I think that's the one thing you have. If you're getting the ball in those are good areas and you're in the final third and you just need someone to be there, tap it in, make a run, you want Brennan Johnson. But if you're trying to break down a team and you need someone to help with the build-up and the all-round play, Brennan Johnson doesn't really do that. He's very good at the final action. And I think Thomas Frank wants his wingers to be good carriers and take on people and create. And I don't think Brennan Johnson is the best at that. It's weirdly like would be better as a 9 under Thomas Frank in a weird way, but he's not a number 9. I can't explain it. So Kudus is obviously going in on the right. As we spoke about, when Kulusevski's back, maybe you see Xavi Simons on the left. Kolo Muani could potentially play on the left, but I think he's better up top. I think for like just experience, you'd probably go with Brennan Johnson because the harder thing to do in football is score goals, and he can do that. He can have an absolute stinker and he can still score. And that, people talk about goals and assist merchants, this and that, but it's a very good attribute to have, even if you're a stinker, to score a goal. But I want to see Wilson Odobert have a run in. I think he's a player that with game time and confidence will grow to build up that momentum. And I think we've seen bits and bobs of Odobert and what he can bring. I mean, I feel a bit like Tell's obviously unlucky to miss out, and I'm not quite sure why you've gone him and made Tell permanent if he's not really in the plans. Could that money have been saved? I don't know. But it depends on the game, really. I think if you want to be taking people on your wingers to be more involved, maybe you go with an Odobert. But if you feel like you're going to create the opportunities, and maybe with a Xavi Simons you will, maybe you do Brennan Johnson. But I think Johnson and probably Kudus for now, but I do rate Odobert.
Yeah, I feel like Odobert as well is still, I mean, like Tell, they are quite raw. And like when he came on against Bournemouth, Odobert, he did look good. He did look like willing to dribble at players. And you mentioned there, Randal Colomani can play left. There are options there. And I can imagine Thomas Frank probably himself doesn't know the right option at the moment. But even like, and it was weird with Brennan Johnson because, again, he did have quite a poor game against Bournemouth, but the whole team did. But against Manchester City, he got his goal, great movement into the box. Against Burnley, he scored a goal that isn't really stereotypical of him. Sarr playing a through ball through on the left, and he's on the end of it, and he shoots across goal, and it goes in. So it is just like Scott. I call him the winger Scott McTominay because he does just crash into that area and score goals. And hard thing to do in football stereotypically is scoring goals. But I think how I see it is, and obviously you can agree or disagree with me with this, is how Thomas Frank used Mbeumo. He didn't obviously always want him like dribbling on the wing and being like, to the like byline sort of thing. But in that sort of middle space on the right hand or left hand side, I could imagine him working quite efficiently there because you have Kudus dribbling from deep, getting onto the edge of the area for crosses across the area, and then Brennan Johnson being on the back of it. And that's what we saw in the games against City and Burnley. So, yeah, at the moment, I think Brennan Johnson just stays in, but like many footballers, they should not be content with just, they've got to keep on their A game. And now we move on to strikers. And this is a very intriguing one because we've got 3 very different strikers now, which I think is a good thing. Actually, 4 if we count Dane Scarlett, but I could imagine he could be loaned out potentially. But in the striking position, I mean, Matthias Tel can obviously play there as well. But we've got now Dominic Solanke, who, again, at the time of recording, might be injured, might not be. We've got Richarlison and new deadline day signing Randal Kolo Muani. And as I mentioned as well, I spoke to Kevin Hatchard about Randal Kolo Muani and what he makes of him as well.
But another player I want to talk about, our deadline day signing of Randal Kolo Muani. And I've done a deep dive on my own channel, the Southampton Spurs YouTube channel. Description should be in this video as well if you want to check that out. But, this is a player who has been linked with Spurs. I mean, I remember about 2 or 3 years ago, he was being linked with us when Ange Postecoglou first came in, even as recently as 6 months ago. And there's some question marks over it because, he had, and you can tell me more better than this, Kev, he had a great start to his career really in France and went to Frankfurt and really delivered. Then at PSG, probably not given a chance. And then his loan at Juve was quite successful. So how do you see him fitting in this team, which already has Richarlison and Dominic Solanke up top?
Yeah, I think he is a great pickup. I said on the morning of deadline day, I thought he'd be a great market opportunity for somebody because you have to bear in mind, this was a guy that most of the market thought was going to Juventus almost all summer because that was expected to be the deal. He'd been very successful there on loan. Juve had the will to get it done. PSG were happy to get him out of the building because he's not a player that Luis Enrique particularly likes in terms of what his fit is for the team. And so that looked as though it was a deal that was going to get done. Something went wrong in terms of maybe PSG changed the conditions, maybe they asked for too much, and Juventus turned to Luis Openda instead and brought him in from Leipzig. So suddenly you had a player that can play wide, can play through the middle, has played in the World Cup final, has succeeded in the Bundesliga, and he was available. And I think Spurs have done the right thing. I actually thought, I was kind of gobsmacked that Bayern weren't more active in chasing him rather than Nicholas Jackson. I thought he would have been a much, much better fit for Bayern than Nicholas Jackson. But they didn't, and Spurs took advantage of that. And you've got a guy that is mobile, is quick, played really well for Juventus. When you bear in mind he hadn't played a lot for PSG in the build-up to that loan spell. He's pretty much scoring goals from when he arrived. Important goals as well, big goals. And he helped them qualify for the Champions League. So there's absolutely no reason why he shouldn't be a successful player at Tottenham.
Yeah, and do you know what it is? And Tottenham have done this summer. Is they're signing players that we didn't have in that sort of makeup. Randal Kolo Muani, Mohamed Kudus, Palhinha. Lots of players that we didn't have, like a tough six or these sort of mazy dribblers as well. And one more question on this. And Tottenham fans were crying out for a left winger on deadline day, and Randal Kolo Muani was the last signing that we did make. But Xavi Simons and Kolo Muani can both play on that left. Are you confident that, there was names being touted around like Ademola Lookman from Atalanta? Do you think Spurs maybe should have still gone for that sort of player, or do you think they've still got enough? Because obviously they've got Tel and Odebear as well in that position.
No, I think they're well stocked there. I think Kolo Muani can play from that area if you want him to. Obviously, we know him as a striker, but he can play in a wider role. Xavi's a bit different in the sense that he will naturally gravitate out to that left-hand side. But I wouldn't necessarily start him out there. I don't think that's the best use of him. I think what you want really is him in kind of more central areas or the kind of inside left channel, half space, if you like. And then let him do his thing, really. So I think they've got plenty of options on that side. I wouldn't be overly worried.
Yeah, I'm quite content with our window. I gave it a 7 out of 10 on my channel. I think we've done quite enough.
But, on the back of that, as I say in that video, 3 very different strikers. And the way I see it is Richarlison maybe better in the box, better aerially, hold-up play. Solanke good at that as well, but I think he likes dropping deep, playing that sort of Harry Kane role. And Muani, or Kolo Muani, is more of a dribbler. Loves dribbling from the left, which I think would be something that Tottenham haven't had for a while in that striker position. So what do you sort of see as the makeup of Tottenham's, focal point, their number 9?
Yeah, you've got a really good mix in there. Like Richarlison, Solanke, and Kolo Muani, they're all very different. I think before he got that injury the back end of last season, Solanke was playing quite well for you guys, and then he got an injury the back end of last season. I don't think he's quite recovered from that injury. I don't think he's at his best, and I think what Solanke needs is full fitness to run a form, and he's not quite getting that luck right now. So, he's going to have to probably fight back for a spot. And I think in terms of ability to drop deep and link play, he offers more than Richarlison. But the one thing about Solanke is if he doesn't get service, he doesn't really do anything. He doesn't score. He's maybe his movement and ability in the box isn't as good as a Richarlison, who is just a nuisance. He'll just get in the way or just do something, and he can get a goal, Richarlison, but he might not offer the hold up or the general play that Solanke does. And I think with Kolo Muani, you've got a blend of the two. Now he's not as good as Richarlison in the box, but he's better than Solanke in the box, and he's probably not as good as Solanke outside the box, but he's better than Richarlison outside the box. And he's probably a little bit more versatile in terms of ability to drop deep. He's someone that really likes to get the ball and carry it, Kolo Muani, and dribble up, which would be good in transition and potentially good with low blocks as well. So I do think, Kolo Muani would be best as a nine, but I think you have to see what you're going to get with Kolo Muani, how he does in the Premier League, how he does in the system. And I think if you're going off current form, you'd probably continue with Richarlison. The only thing is, with the front line is Richarlison and Brennan Johnson, do they offer enough out of just the end product to be in that front line? Whereas if you've got, Kolo Muani, Brennan Johnson, and Kudus, maybe it actually works better in terms of complementing each other. Or if you had Richarlison, maybe you try someone like an Odebear, just because I think in terms of complements. But I think Solanke's had injury issues. I think Solanke, is probably better than Richarlison in my opinion, but is just struggling at the moment. He might not be fit. I think you don't know what you're going to get at Kolo Muani, but I would give it a go, particularly because I think he offers a little bit more outside the box than Richarlison.
Yeah, I feel like Richarlison had a great start to the season. 2 goals and an assist in the Burnley and the City games, but against Bournemouth, he did look like the ball wasn't sticking at his feet. He was struggling. He looked a bit marooned up top, trying to pin two. I mean, Diakite and Senesi did a job on him. To be fair, especially in those games where he's going to be pressed, where he's going to be, he hasn't got the sort of hold up play like Harry Kane did. Or even I think Solanke does. Like under pressure, Solanke with his back to goal, he's really good. I just think it's like what you said there. Spurs have got to learn how to play with Solanke, and maybe Solanke has got to, give a bit more, but bust a gut to get into the area to be on the end of stuff as well. So, yeah, I feel like at the moment, I think Richie gets the next game or so, but I am going to put Kolo Muani in because I just want to see, I want to see what this guy's about. We've been touting him for years. He looks strong. And I feel like he's got all the potential to really succeed at Spurs. And hopefully, if he does, we will execute. I don't know if there's an option or an obligation in the deal, but hopefully, trigger something that makes it happen. So that is our 4 at the back team, the 4-2-3-1. We've got Vicario in goal, Udogie at left back, Porro at right back, Van der Ven and Romero are the centre backs, Bentancur and Sarr in the holding midfield positions, Kudos, Xavi Simons, and Brennan Johnson as the sort of wingers, attackers, and Kolo Muani up top. And just to round it up then, Alice, if we're playing a 3 at the back, say against PSG in the Champions League, which we're facing, Arsenal away, Liverpool away, those sort of tricky games where historically we'd never turn up and the back 3 might help us. How are you sort of pivoting this team? What are you sort of changing it to?
I think Danso obviously becomes the third centre back to come in. I think that's quite self-explanatory. I think Porro probably suits the back 5 best, same with maybe Udogie. So I think that's quite self-explanatory. And it's interesting because you can do a 2 in midfield and a front 3, or you can do a sort of 2-1-2, sort of because the wing backs bring the width, and I think it would be a 2-1-2 where again you look at maybe Xavi Simons as the 10. We saw Kudus and Richarlison up top versus PSG last time, and I think Kudus and Kolo Muani would work really well.
Yeah, really good.
Xavi Simons in the 10, Kudus and Kolo Muani up top, and then behind them, I mean, I would look at potentially, and I don't know if it would work, but Palhinha and Bentancur if you really want to go defensive, but potentially you go with Palhinha and Sarr because of just the energy that Sarr will bring and like how much issues he caused Vitinha. I know that might be unfair on Bentancur, who could argue brings a little bit more than Palhinha in terms of on the ball. But I think Palhinha in those big games of defensive stability, I think maybe there's a part of me that goes, if you really want to be safe, you just do Palhinha and Bentancur. But I think Sar's brought so much in the opening games that maybe you try either Bentancur and Sar or Palhinha and Sar, Simmons as the 10, and Kolo Muani and Kudus up top.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's what we'll go for. I think Palhinha in those sort of, those games where you're going to probably have a lot less of the ball. You need a tough tackler. You need someone who's going to win his duels. I think he is perfect in those situations. So, yeah, that will be our back three. I can't really argue with that because it was so good against PSG as well. And it'll just, as we're chasing a game, maybe that's when you bring on a Xavi Simmons or maybe even another winger to sort of, Brennan Johnson to close it out. Take it to the corner, maybe counter attack as well. So, yeah, I like the sounds of that, Alice. But yeah, so those are the teams that we've gone for. Obviously, Thomas Frank, it's all down to you to make the right choices. I'm glad it's not my decision to make. But yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed that, guys, doing a bit of a squad audit and trying to build Thomas Frank's perfect Tottenham setup. Alice, obviously, people know you for your Manchester United content, but you do a lot of good Spurs content. Where can people find you if they don't know you already?
Yeah, thanks for watching. Make sure you give Sonny's channel some support by subscribing now. And look, if you want my Spurs content, it is Aquila Football on YouTube, which is just Alice spelled backwards. If you want Man United content, at the moment, a lot of rants. But that's Alice Talks Football.
Yeah, we'll come along to see those rants where you're losing your head week after week. But yeah, thank you for bigging up my channel as well. We're trying to, I think we're about, at the time of recording, 200 subs away from 10,000, which to me feels like a big milestone. And hopefully we'll get there by the end of the year, if not the end of the month. But yeah, thanks guys for watching. As Alice said, leave your likes, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and in the comments down below, what would be your perfect Tottenham team? But until next time, guys, up the Spurs, and who cares about United? Bye.